So it's official. Hoyoverse just released Swirl of Heavenly Spear, the character event warp for Jingyuan. They left the characters exactly the same as closed beta test. Very nice of them. It's very strong banner. I'll talk a bit in terms of my overall thoughts and details on these characters. But let's check out the Lightcone banner as well, which we'll talk towards the end for those of you who are interested. We have Brilliant Fixation, Before Dawn, Jingyuan's Lightcone. We have Day 1 of my new life here, Only Silence Remains, and I think this is something Astro Rendezvous or something like that, the one that buffs same elemental type damage for Harmony Lightcones. Day 1 of my new life is like a AoE defense reduction. Very interesting as well, pretty good one as well. But now let's go ahead in the game engine and let's take a look in terms of my thoughts on these characters as well. Overall, I think this is an extremely solid 4-star cast for this banner. Very strong supports. We have Tingyun, who's extremely strong in terms of like a buffing ability. We have Sushang, a single target hunt character, as well as a more defensive March 70. Kind of like form a team on their own because Tingyun is AoE, she's single target, she's a support, and she's a more defensive unit. So very nice banner in terms of if this was your first limited banner that you're pulling on, maybe you didn't pull on Zida's first banner as well. I think it's, in terms of overall, very highly good value for your overall account. Tingyun, very strong character. She's one of the meta characters right now in the game, as I'm sure a lot of you might have heard from CBT3 testers already as well. Very nice of them really to leave the banner the same. It was a very strong banner in CBT3 as well. So right now, in terms of the game, if you are not lucky to, for example like pull Bronya in your first beginner warp, you probably will be playing Esther. And if you're looking for Tingyun, she's a very solid addition for your second team or even your main team as well, because she works very well with meta characters that are, for example, Zila on the main banner, Jingyuan on the main banner. But even if you don't play these two characters, you can easily run them with other hyper carry style DPSs as well. You could run them, for example, with Yanqing. You can run them with Himiko if you're running them as DPSs. You could, for example, run with Danheng as well, or Zila. Very strong tool in terms of like focusing a lot of damage on them, as Tingyun does quite a bit of support buffing as well. So how she works basically is, if you look at her kit, she has an ultimate ability that restores energy to the target unit and also increases their damage. Her skill basically grants them this buff, this benediction buff, which increases their attack based on Tingyun's attack as well. And when they attack, they deal basically like additional damage as well. So a very strong in terms of damage output support, pushes up your energy restoration. You could even use it, for example, like on Gepard's ultimate, Bailu's ultimate, Natasha's ultimate to quickly burst heal a unit. Very flexible in terms of strategic options as well for your team. I think she's S tier, and I don't think much of the community disagrees as of the time of the meta in 1.0 as well. Let's talk about Sushang now. Sushang is an extremely strong hunt class damage dealer. There are currently only 4 hunt type characters in the game. We have Zila, which if you didn't pull on her banner, probably won't have her. And if you didn't get lucky for Yanqing, you probably wouldn't have him as well. Maybe you got another 5-star. And that leaves a lot of us probably with either Danheng or as well as Sushang in terms of our 4-star hunt class options. And I'm sure a lot of you have realized that hunt class is actually quite important because they move very fast. They break enemies in terms of memory and memory of chaos, as well as the simulated universe, and damage typing in terms of physical. There are really not many options right now as well. 1.0, you have Sushang, you have physical MC, and you have Clara, and that's about it. And one of them is a 5-star character, of course. So Sushang is extremely solid in terms of typing. You will realize that quite a lot of characters are weak to physical, especially in the early game meta in terms of 1.0. Like a lot of the bosses that you will face, a lot of them tend to be weak to physical, very easily taken down by Sushang. So why is she so strong? Basically, her whole kit revolves around like breaking enemies' weaknesses. She doesn't have like break efficiency and stuff like that, but for example, you see her ultimate ability here. She advances herself forward immediately after she uses her ultimate, which does a lot of physical damage and sufficient amounts of break damage on the enemy as well. So you get that break bar, you go again, you chip it down even more. She's also has very strong skill where she does a lot of these like additional sword stands, a lot of damage if the enemy's weakness broken as well. So fantastic in her kit. She also has like a speed up in her kit if enemies are defense broken, weakness broken as well. So very independent, doesn't care too much of the team comp she's in. It works very well with Jingyuan also, because if you are playing Tingyun, for example with Jingyuan, you want Tingyun to hyper carry Jingyuan, and she's more or less going to be left alone doing her thing. Very strong contributor in terms of physical single target damage as well as break damage in terms of physical as well. Super strong. I've done a build guide on her already. You guys can check it out if you're interested. I really like this character. Even with her nerfs coming to official launch, I still think she's a tremendously strong character. A lot of people are not talking about this unit yet because she's of course a gacha 4-star. So if you don't pull on a banner, chances of you getting her from the standard pool is much lower than other characters. And now let's talk about March 7. A lot of people are going to be like, this is the one that is the least favorable out of the 3 of them. But I disagree. I actually think that March 7 is the one that I'm most excited to get, especially if you can get multiple copies of that particular character. Why do I say that? Because her playstyle is more of like a defensive unit up till you get this one. Her playstyle is more or less like standardized until you get E6. And E6 changes up a lot of things, especially for players who, like myself, who are trying to like nuzlocke this and play with only 4-star characters. This is extremely strong because she becomes a healer. Basically, once you grant a shield, you restore HP equal to their HP. And a little bit, not a lot, but don't forget this is on top of that shielding that she provides already. And her Eidolons are of course very strong. And another one that is also very strong, it just utilizes her counter effect much more often as well. And also increasing a little bit of damage based on her defense. So making her scalability much better. For those of you who don't know, her scaling is very awkward. She scales off both attack as well as defense. Because her damage from her ultimate and stuff comes from her attack and counters her without her E4. Her counters come from attack as well, and her shielding comes from her defense. And she's a preservation unit, so she wants a little bit of HP if she wants to do a bit of tanking as well. So that's the only main downside in terms of March 7's overall kit and her single target shielding. But other than that, I think it's also a very good ice sub DPS role that a lot of people can build. And if you guys are interested, for example, in my comparison with Jingyuan versus Zealer, I've done that on the channel already. I highly recommend you check that one out if you want a more in-depth comparison. Basically, Jingyuan is a very strong AoE damage dealer right now. Will feel like an upgrade to Serval in a lot of sense, especially with the banner cast being so good. He can form an entire team on his own. And at this point of time, probably a lot of us are maybe breaching through Memory 11 and beyond, trying to build our second team. The 4 characters there can just form a team on their own into the second half. So I think that's a very nice addition at this point of time in the game of 1.0 as well. If you want more information, check the video out, but I think it is a very good value video. And now let's talk in terms of like the Lightcone banner that we have, and we're going to go into the Lightcone screen real quick. Okay, so the bad boy himself, Before Dawn, this was actually nerfed already since the CBT3. This is extremely broken. I've already done like a full Lightcone guide in terms of all the Lightcones in the game. I'll link it up in the video description, or I'll link it on a video card or put it in the video description for any of you who are interested in my full details comparing every single Lightcone with each other. But long story short, in terms of the 3 Lightcones, I think Before Dawn is absolutely broken. Between this and Zealer's Lightcone in the night, this is way better. Like worthy of a 5-star limited status. It will feel very different in terms of without his Lightcone and with his personal Lightcone, Jingyuan's playstyle and damage. So I think very good value if you guys have access and maybe you don't mind pulling. Of course, Lightcone banners are never recommended by a lot of people because you don't get a new playstyle, it's just additional damage. Planetary Rendezvous, which is a really strong Lightcone because if you are playing more single target, you can equip this, for example, on Tingyun. Tingyun in the same team as Jingyuan will be buffing him because of the lightning damage bonus. Very strong if you're playing like a hyper carry Jingyuan style using a Planet Rendezvous. So that is for this one. And we have, of course, Only Silence Remains. It's very nice because the exact roster can be used by every single character. Only Silence Remains can be used by Sushang as well. If you, for example, don't have the 5-star Lightcone here, cruising the Stellar Sea, which can be gotten for free. I think this one is also a pretty good one. I was using it for quite some time. Gives a very nice crit rate increase when there are 2 or fewer enemies on the field. And Hunt class characters generally do play 2 on the field. So I think it's a very nice if you have, for example, only these 2, and you need to put one on your main Hunt DPS, you can put this on your other one as well. Out of all of the Lightcones on the banner, other than of course the 5-star, this is probably the one that I want to stack up on because you really want to get max level as soon as you can. What it does at max level is it increases nicely 24% defense for preservation unit, and also increases the damage resistance of all allies by 12%. This is extremely massive because it stacks with other damage reduction items or skills, for example like Fire MC's damage reduction in a kit, or even for example Guard of Wuthering Snow, which gives an additional 8% damage rest. So it's pretty insane. I think this is very good value. You generally need 2 in a team because you can't stack it. It only has 1 of the effects. So you need 1 on each side ideally to give the whole team like damage reduction, especially if the enemies are AoE attacker, dealing a lot of damage in AoE. I think this is tremendously good value. out of the three, I do like this one the most. In current state of meta, this is probably the best preservation Lightcone as of 1.0. I've compared the rest of them in my video. Go and check it out if you're interested as well. And well, yeah, if you guys like such content, I'll be doing this every patch, so like and subscribe and check back as well whenever you want a second thought in terms of opinion and etc. Do check on these two other videos which I probably mentioned in the video or I think you might be interested in as well. And see you in the next video.